Hello and welcome to this CSS tutorial. In this small video we will be covering the course material that you'll be learning, as well as go over some of the prerequisites in order to follow along with this video. This video is designed specifically for beginners to start and create their very first website. Now, if you're wanting to actually just hop straight into the programming, you can skip this little bit of an introduction and just hop into the actual syntax base, the actual learning of CSS. But this first little bit is going to be an introduction of what it is we are going to be doing in the course, and you can totally skip this if you want, but if you are a beginner to CSS, definitely watch it. It's only a 10-minute introduction, but we will shortly be getting into the actual programming and stuff like that. So let me go through this short slides and we'll get on with actually programming. Well, without further ado, let's jump right into it. You will follow along and learn CSS from the ground up without any extra or previous knowledge. So going from absolutely zero knowledge with CSS to learning how to develop and create a very beautiful first website. This course is specifically designed so that you can practice your new skills that you learn as you follow along inside of the course. Each section should take about 15 or so minutes to complete. Obviously, this is accounting for the fact that you'll be pausing the video and, diddle-daddling on your laptop as you try to program, but it should take about 15 minutes a day. Try to complete about 3 lessons a day to keep up the consistency and to retain as much knowledge as you possibly can. I would not recommend you just grind through the entire video throughout one session, sit and try to learn as much as you possibly can. I know from experience that won't necessarily work. So I would definitely recommend that you limit yourself to 3 to 5 lessons per day. Now, whenever it comes to requirements in order to follow along with this tutorial, it's pretty simple. You're not going to need too much. You're not going to need some crazy top-of-the-line computer or anything like that. In this tutorial, all you're going to need is a computer, a simple Chromebook if you so need, although I would definitely not recommend a Chromebook, but a simple laptop would do, nothing too crazy. And the second prerequisite you're going to need in order to follow along with this tutorial is to understand and know the basics of HTML. Nothing too crazy. You don't need to master the entirety of HTML before you come here to learn CSS, but simply the basics of HTML is required in order for you to follow along with this tutorial. Now, a nice environment, it might seem very cliche and not too needed, but I personally know that in order to truly learn a new skill or a new trade, you definitely need to have a nice distraction-free environment. So that would include removing your phone from the room, not being inside of a very noisy and loud place. It simply is going to prohibit your ability to learn. It makes it incredibly difficult, and it cannot be recommended enough to have a nice environment. Simply a quiet, doesn't have to be cozy, doesn't have to be, meditation style at the top of a mountain, but a simple, nice, and preferably well-lit environment. And whenever it comes to the requirements for this tutorial, it is genuinely a requirement to stop looking for tutorials. There is this thing called tutorial hell, where you are trying to learn a new thing in programming, and in this case you're obviously looking to learn CSS. Stop looking up thousands upon thousands of videos to learn tiny little bits here and there. This tutorial specifically will cover everything you need to know in order to get started with CSS. Stop looking for a bunch of tutorials and get out of tutorial hell. You know that feeling of whenever you're looking up 1,000 YouTube videos but you didn't learn a single thing? Yeah, that's called tutorial hell, and every single one of us programmers have been there. So we're going to have to get out of that, and a requirement of this video is that if you're going to actually want to learn CSS from the ground up, it is a requirement for you to follow all the way through. You can skip forward in certain sections if you want, but obviously that's going to be valuable information that you'll be missing out on. But personally, I would recommend that you stick with one video, specifically this one because it's designed for beginners, to learn the entirety of, if not the most of the basics of CSS. So a requirement for this video: computers, basics of HTML, a nice environment, and to simply stop looking through tutorials and to just use this one because it is designed specifically for beginners. Now I'm going to really quickly cover what exactly it is that CSS is, because I don't want you people to be clicking on this video thinking you're going to learn how to program, but you don't exactly know what this CSS language, whatever the hell it is, actually is. So I'm going to define exactly what it is CSS is real quick, and I'm going to use a car analogy and a house analogy to help it really sink in. So whenever you're trying to create a website, there is actually 3 separate languages. Most of the time, there's 3 separate languages that are used to actually create a website, a functioning, working website. So you have HTML, hypertext markup language, which is basically the door on a car, it's the tires, it's the chassis, it's the main bone and structure. You know, it's the main thing that is actually, it's the main part of the website. And what CSS, what we will be learning inside of this tutorial is it's like the paint job, it's the nice finish, it's the thing that makes it look pretty and, you know, function in a nice aesthetic way, and it's for to make a nice UI, user interface, or UX, user experience. And CSS is basically the paint job of a car. And then you have, in order to complete a website, you need this thing called JavaScript. And JavaScript is basically the engine of a car. It's the thing that actually makes the thing go. It is the thing that connects it. JavaScript is the language that connects you to servers. It's the language that connects you to banking information, whatever it may be. It's the underneath the hood and what's actually like running, the pusher behind things. So inside of this tutorial, we'll be learning CSS specifically, and we will not be touching on JavaScript, but we will be touching a little bit on HTML. I mean, not really, but a little bit. And just to drive home what exactly CSS is think about it as in a house analogy. HTML is the wood and the frame, the main structure of the house. That's what HTML does, and that is kind of a requirement for you to have in order to follow along with this video, is the understanding of HTML. Whilst CSS, the thing we'll be learning, is the paint job on the house. The nice windows, the nice new door, it's everything that makes it look really, really aesthetically pleasing. The shingles, everything like that. But then you have JavaScript, that is the lighting, that is the plumbing inside the house, all the air vents and stuff like that. It's the thing that makes the house an actual house. So once again, inside of this video, we will be mainly learning CSS. And if you are looking to just jump into programming, I would recommend starting with HTML. Well, in order to follow along with this video, you need to learn HTML. But if you're trying to get into programming, start with HTML and just learn a little bit of that stuff. And then if you want, come here and learn some CSS to where it can truly drive home your new programming language. So in chapter 1, we'll be going through the setup. That was going to include installing any programs or software, specifically the IDE, the Integrated Development Program. That's where it is we'll be actually programming. We'll help you install this, and if you already have an IDE that you're familiar with, you can go ahead and use that. But if you're a complete beginner, don't be frightened by this process. We're going to download an IDE and help actually get it onto your system to where you can actually work and follow along inside of this tutorial. You can use a different IDE if you'd want, but there's going to be a specific one, Atom, that we'll be using throughout this tutorial. And we'll also be setting up our programming environment, so that being the IDE, the Integrated Development Program. We will be setting it up and familiarizing ourselves with the actual program to where we feel a little bit more comfortable with what it is we're doing in the environment. We'll be setting up any specific settings or going through different fonts, just making it look and feel nice to where it's easy to work and easy to program. And also in chapter 1, we'll be talking about what it is we're covering. So basically what I'm doing right now. That's kind of the gist of chapter 1. And in chapter 2, which will actually be the introduction to CSS, so we'll actually start getting our hands dirty and we'll start physically programming, which is kind of the thing that you guys are all here for. So inside of chapter 2, we'll be looking at what CSS is and how exactly it is we'll be using it, and just basically the simple basics of CSS. And also inside of the introduction to CSS, we'll be setting up a style sheet. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, so we'll be setting up a style sheet and linking it to an HTML document. So basically, chapter 2 is just the introduction and the basics of CSS. So whenever it comes to chapter 3, we'll be working with selectors and properties. This is basically, once again, the basics of CSS. We'll be getting started with CSS syntax. Syntax is basically the actual programming like stuff, you know, all those ones and zeros, okay, not the ones and zeros, but like all the lines of code and stuff like that. That's what syntax is. So we'll actually be getting our hands dirty and we'll be learning CSS. Inside of chapter 3, we'll also be learning selectors and properties and how exactly it is we'll be implementing them and how it is we'll be using them. Don't worry if you don't understand what exactly it is I'm talking about right now. You'll soon learn what it is this jibber jabber is and all the stuff like that. So if you don't understand a word, it's okay. You'll learn it later inside of the tutorial. So don't worry about what a selectors or properties are. Just know that you'll be learning that inside the course. Also in chapter 3, we'll be defining when it is you should use specific selectors and how it exactly it is you use the selectors. In chapter 4, coloring and formatting, we're going to be basically doing exactly that. We're going to be coloring and formatting different things such as texts and the backgrounds, stuff like that. We'll be learning different about different colors and color types and actually how to use them. We'll learn how to apply them to different texts and backgrounds and other elements that are going to be inside of your website. We're going to be learning about how to color text and backgrounds and a bunch of different other elements that is going to be inside of your website that you program as you follow along with this tutorial. In chapter 5, we're going to be working with fonts and text manipulation. It's going to be a really quick and easy, but very important chapter to be learning. Simply put, font and text manipulation is kind of in its name. We're going to be manipulating text, and that's going to include font families, font weights, font size, and a bunch of other stuff like that. And that's basically going to be it for chapter 5. Chapter 6, though, on the other hand, is going to be layout, which is going to be really important whenever it comes to actually designing and placing different things inside of your website. We'll be learning various techniques to manipulate the layout of the website, which is going to be one of the most crucial and important things to learn whenever it comes to learning CSS. And also we're going to be learning some really basic fundamental CSS concepts, like really basics. They're going to be incredibly helpful for you to learn and get the grasp of. And if you need to go over different chapters and review them multiple times until you get them, remember, this isn't about trying to complete the tutorial, it's trying to learn as much as you can from the tutorial. So make sure you go back and review or go back and redo it if you don't quite understand it, because inside of this tutorial, the only thing that you're trying to actually get is learn, not the flex of, saying that you completed a 6-hour long tutorial. The goal is to actually learn, if that makes sense. So in chapter 7, we'll be learning about Flexbox. We'll talk about the ins and outs of Flexbox and exactly how it is we'll be using it. And we'll also be talking about the theory behind Flexbox. If you don't understand, once again, what I'm talking about Flexbox, don't worry, you'll soon learn what Flexbox is. And in chapter 8, we'll be talking about the grid. We'll talking about the alternative methods that you can use. Once again, if you don't understand these concepts, it's okay, you'll soon learn them. In chapter 9, it's going to be an incredibly fun one. We're going to be talking about animations and transitions. So this is going to be the really interactive and the thing that makes your website really pop out and actually stand out. We're going to be covering what animations and transitions are, as well as how to actually implement them and when to actually implement them. We'll also be covering pseudo selectors. Don't worry, you don't have to know what that is right now. and we'll also create and apply multiple CSS animations to the website that you will be creating as you follow along with this. So in chapter 10, this one's going to be really fun because you're going to be testing your new skills. We're going to be completely starting over on the website, and you're going to start from the basics, build an entire new website from just using the skills that you've learned throughout this tutorial. If you need, you can go back and, relearn anything that you might have forgotten or need a bit of a review on. But other than that, the whole goal of this is you're going to be starting from absolutely scratch, no HTML or CSS, and you're going to build a website from the ground up. You're going to use all of the skills that you've learned throughout this tutorial, and you're going to build a completely new, fresh, amazing looking website from the ground up. Now, whenever it comes to learning inside of this tutorial, the goal is not to just play the video as long as you possibly can and say you've learned that much. The goal is to actually truly take the time throughout every single aspect of the tutorial and to genuinely suck up as much information as you possibly can and retain it. That is kind of what chapter 10 is going to be about, is to simply show what it is you've retained and show your new skills. And that's basically going to cover it for chapter 10. Now, let's get started on chapter 1, but before we do that, once again, I have to mention that if you truly want to follow along with this video, I would highly recommend that you stick to this one video. It's going to be long and agonizing, but it's going to be the easiest way to actually learn as much as you possibly can throughout the entire video and actually learn as much as you can whenever it comes to CSS. To get out of tutorial hell, you have to stick to one tutorial to where you're not going through a bunch of different ones and you're just getting snipped little bits inside of different things. This one video for beginners specifically will cover everything you need. If you're here just to look for a specific time marker or a specific idea or something like that, there are timestamps in the bottom of the scroll bar, and it will show you exactly what it is we're going to be teaching inside of this tutorial. Once again, I cannot stress it enough that if you're truly a beginner and you're trying to learn CSS, I would stick to this one tutorial, grind it out. It's going to take you about 5 days to complete, but once more, it's going to be the most efficient way to possibly learn CSS. So if you'll join me, we'll get started and actually get our hands dirty with some CSS. And yeah, let's get into it.